Karma here with your Mars in Virgo cheat codes. If you are here, you understand that we are astrologically influenced by the tug and push of the planets and stars. With the understanding of how this influences us in life, we can better navigate life's obstacles. So welcome to the club, and let's jump into the energy around Mars in Virgo. So on June 17th, Mars will enter Virgo and it will exit Virgo on August 8th. The signs that are most impacted are Virgo, Cancer, and Gemini. So the Virgo energy and the Mars energy are kind of different, right? Mars is really around your actions, the desire you have, your passion, the things you move forward in and initiate, right? It's also captive of your aggression, your courage, your confidence, the strength that you have. Whereas Virgo energy is more of like a systematic, analytical energy. It's really about the mentality you have around the systems you put in place in like your everyday routines, right? This is kind of like your routine nature. Also, this Virgo energy goes into the realm of like pessimism and perfectionism. So Mars, the actions that you take in this moment for everyone, right, with Mars and Virgo, there's an emphasis here on your actions being in the realm of analysis, right? Now, this energy also is kind of like opposing. Mars is kind of impulsive. Okay, it rules over Aries. It has an impulsive nature about it and maybe like a short stay type of nature, like quick to action type of nature, whereas Virgo is very like diligent. There's an emphasis here on like your actions and almost like a tug of war around you sticking to something and creating a system around it. Or if it's not perfect, the war between like you moving on or you working, pushing forward and continuing to find ways that will improve the systems that you are putting or have in place. Mars really gives you the push and motivation to kind of move forward towards efficiency. So that's what Mars is working on in Virgo in this particular moment. So on the higher vibe of this energy, you can find systematicness, like efficiency, very goal oriented. And then like on the lower vibration of this can come with perfectionism, criticality, and pessimism. So really, let's talk about the aspects that actually happen. All right, Mars is sextile to Jupiter. Jupiter will be in Cancer. So that is going to be related to opportunities, discoveries, your habits, your methods, and your systems. You have Sun sextile to Mars, and the Sun will be in Cancer. So your focus again will be around your methods, your home, and like your internal security. Then we have Venus square Mars. This is going to be an energy around like perfectionism and actions around like your mental persuasion. Okay, so we're going to go into, I'm not going to go too deeply into the overall thing because we'll talk about it sign by sign. However, let's talk about how to look at this. This will be for the rising signs. This will be most accurate for rising signs. Okay, if you want to look at this from your sun sign or your moon sign, you can, right? For your sun sign, you will need to look at this from the perspective of your focus, the perspective of your ego and pride, the perspective of your attitude. If you're looking at this from the perspective of your moon, this is going to be related to your emotions, your instincts, your intuition, and your habits. Okay, so if you want to look at it from a different point of view, just make sure that you understand the difference in the lens that you're looking at it in, okay? But again, with the signs, it is going to be most accurate for the rising sign. All right, now let's jump right into it. Cancer. So Mars will be entering Virgo in your third house. Your third house represents your mind, your communication, your perspective. Okay, it represents your logic. It represents short-term travel. This is like online activities, okay? Sales and marketing. Okay? So this relates to your actions within this realm, your courage within this realm, your ability to push forward within this realm of life, okay? So on June 17th, Mars enters Virgo and it creates a square to your 11th house. So your actions as it relates to your perception, your communication, how you actually act, your diligence within that area. This has an impact on your community. That's your 11th house, and that is the house of Taurus. There's something here that happened before Mars entered into Virgo because this is a separating square, right? So this is back when Mars was in Leo, right? That it created a square to Uranus in Taurus, right? In the last degrees of Taurus, okay? So there's an emphasis here around the sudden change, and this could be within your friends group, your community, right? That you might be trying to adjust your mind to. You're trying to figure out what to communicate. You're trying to figure out what to do, right? In this moment, as Mars enters into Virgo, this is where you kind of switch your mind to like a systematic, diligent type of energy, right? To help you push forward here. Mars is entering out of Leo, which is the energy around drama, right? Creativity, charisma, but drama nonetheless. And now we're entering into analysis, systematic behaviors, diligent behaviors, and this could be around communication. This could be sales and marketing, we don't know. This is, your perspective. This could be related to early education, right? So there's an emphasis here on, again, something that has already happened within your community. This is your friendships, your social clubs, your acquaintances, your alliances, your earned wealth, your hopes and your wishes, okay? Now, this is like the resourcefulness that you hold there because this is in the realm of Taurus, okay? So there's going to be a need for you as Mars enters Virgo to kind of help yourself recover, concentrate on systematic behaviors, especially within the realm of communication or your perspective. On June 22nd, Mars will come sextile to Jupiter in Cancer, all right? So this is earth and water, right? They nourish one another. So there's an emphasis here on your first house. This is your third house sextile to your first house, okay? So your first house of Cancer, because you are Cancer rising. This is like your sensitivity within self, okay? So now the systematic and diligent behavior as it relates to your mind, language, or communication, right? This is where you see opportunities pop up around like your perception of yourself, okay? Your perception of your overall attitude. It could be that you have a change in attitude. It could be that you push forward, you analyze a situation and how you've communicated, and you recognize the adjustment needs to be with you, right? That is this energy. Again, this is again pushing forward. Virgo represents diligent behavior, doing something over and over and over again. They say Virgos have OCD and they're perfectionists, right? So this is like perfecting your craft, right? Perfecting your mind, your logic, your perception. And this speaks very heavily to opportunities that might actually change your attitude to whatever happened as Virgo was making its way out of Leo, and it created that exact square to Uranus in your 11th house, okay? So as we move on, right there on June 26th, the sun will come sextile to Mars. Okay, so the 22nd, the 24th, and the 26th are pretty important dates. Jupiter and the sun in your first house, right? This is again your intuitive urges. This is emotional triggers as well. The sun comes and combusts Jupiter on the 24th, and I talk about this in my Jupiter in Cancer video. So like those intuitive urges are kind of like dampened a little bit, and so this is after the sun combusts Jupiter, right? The it's separating now. It's in a separating combustion to Jupiter. And now you have the opportunity again to kind of see things more clearly. Your intuition may, as the sun gets closer to Jupiter, your intuition may have been a little haywire, and then there's something that happened that triggered some sort of emotional response from you, and your concentration should be on your diligence as it relates to how you are thinking, what you are communicating, right? And putting a system in place for forward movement. Okay, so as we get past the 24th and we get to the 26th where sun is sextile to Mars, right, there is an opportunity for you to communicate something. There is an opportunity for you to communicate your perspective. There's an opportunity to change your attitude. It pops up into reality for you. Okay. So now we move on to July 23rd when Venus is square Mars. Okay. So this is in your 12th house. Venus is representative of love, beauty, abundance, art. Okay. This is intimacy as well, femininity. So with Venus in Gemini, that is in your 12th house. The 12th house represents like your internal nature, right? This is your connection to your relationships, right? This is your internal subconscious, right? This is your fears, your desires, your worries, your dreams, your fantasies. This is the past, this is secrets, right? This is mystery and mysticism. So there's a square energy here, and it could feel as though something is like secretive, or there's something behind the scenes that is happening. And that can also impact how it is that you are feeling within your mind. So in this moment, especially July 23rd, again, practice that diligent nature. I don't know if you need to get a journal, write things down, but there's something here around your mind and communication that you need to have a steadfast system about, as Mars, and that's what you'll be working on as Mars makes its way through Virgo. Okay, so overall, Cancer, there is a need for you, right? Because there is something here. There are actions around your mentality, actions around your perception, actions around the way that you see things or how you communicate something. This is where the work is going to be. And with the square to the 12th and the 11th house, there's something here about secrecy, or something within your friends community that happened before before Mars entered Virgo, something that you have to work your way through. And this could be around your fears, this could be around secrets, mystery. Okay, so again, just practice diligence in your actions around your mind. Okay, Cancer, I hope this reaches you well. Scorpio, Mars will be entering into your 11th house of community. So your 11th house represents your friendships, your social groups and clubs, your memberships, your alliances, your acquaintances. Okay, it represents your earned wealth, it represents your employer's finances or money, and it also represents your hopes and your wishes and your dreams. As Mars passes through the realm of Virgo, okay, the concentration here is going to be on your behaviors and your action within this realm of life. And the concentration is going to be on your analytical and systematic behaviors within this realm, and how to make life better for yourself, essentially. Now, as Mars makes its way through Virgo, at the beginning stages of that, there is a separating square to Uranus in your 7th house. So you would have seen something around like some sort of trigger, because Mars would have been in the last degrees of Leo, because Uranus is in the last degrees of Taurus, which is your 7th house. You would have been triggered around some sort of ambition or goal within like your partnerships or your long-term connections, or your deep bonds, your even something legal. This would have happened before Mars. This would have happened before June 17th. Okay, so that trigger, that square between Leo and Taurus, which is fire and earth, that doesn't necessarily mesh, just like oil and water, there would have been a trigger for you. And now your ambitions and your goal, that would have been in the realm of your ambitions and goals, right? And your long-term bonds. And now Mars is making its way into your 11th house, right? So this is where you concentrate on your behaviors around your friendships, right? If I think about what the 11th and the 7th house have in common, right? These are friendships. These, again, long-term bonds, your commitments. These are best friends. This could be a best friend for you. But this is your community. And there's an emphasis here. This could even be for someone who's going through legal issues with their employer, or considering going through legal proceedings with an employer, right? There's an emphasis here on, again, you concentrating on your systematic behavior. So example, if you were with an employer and something happened prior to June 17th, this would have been, within the month of June, something triggered at work and something happened and you feel, treated in a specific way, and you now want to, maybe sue, or you want to, try to get a settlement of some sort, right? That we then are entering into your 11th house, which is like employer finances and wealth. Okay. So in order for you to do that, you have to be diligent about it, right? It's just not going to fall into your lap. You're going to have to be consistent with your behavior and going for that. So essentially, that's what this is talking about. That square to the 7th house and Virgo in your 11th house is kind of like, it might be a little bit difficult to initiate, right? But if you put diligence behind your actions, you put some systematic behavior into this equation, you get to your goal. Now, is it going to be easy? No, probably not, right? Suing, a corporation or a company probably is not ever going to be easy, right? However, again, consistency within your behavior is what is going to get you to the finish line, but it will start off a little bit difficult. Okay, so that's an example of what I'm referring to. Now, as we move through, the later parts of June, so this is June 22nd, this is June 24th, and this is June 26th, there is energy here around your 11th and your 9th house. Now, your 9th house also represents law, so this very much support legal proceedings, right? Your 7th house also represents legal battles, okay? So this is why I say your employer, suing an employer, suing someone that employed you at one point. There's an emphasis here on your 11th house and your 9th house. Now, this is creating opportunities. However, like I said before, in the beginning, it may not feel like you're going to be able to push forward in this, but you have to continue with your persistent and systematic behavior. The diligence behind your actions is what really matters in this moment. Okay, so on the 22nd, Mars is going to be sextile Jupiter, okay, and that is development and expansion. So to put this into perspective, the 9th house is ruled by Sagittarius, right? Yours is in the realm of Cancer, but the 9th house in general is ruled by Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. So you're going to hear me say exploration and discovery over and over again, because that's the 9th house, and then that also represents Jupiter, right? So there's some sextile energy between the 11th and the 9th house. What pops up on the 22nd is an opportunity. It may not necessarily feel like an opportunity because it's so close to this square that is separating that I was just talking about before. And then also on the 24th, the sun is making its way into Cancer and it is passing by Jupiter. Now, I'll talk about this in my Jupiter and Cancer video. Jupiter is in exaltation in Cancer, but when the sun gets close to it, the sun kind of overpowers the positive aspects of Jupiter, right? So in this moment, the 24th is when the exact conjunction happens between the sun and Jupiter in your 9th house. You may feel a little bit emotionally triggered, right? So this 22nd energy, although it pops up as an opportunity, it don't feel like one. It might not necessarily feel like one in that moment. But again, the emphasis here is diligence and systematic behaviors. Okay, so you still push forward, even though it may not necessarily feel like an opportunity or might not feel promising to you, you push forward, because in this moment, your intuition is dampened by that combustion of the sun passing by Jupiter in your 9th house. Okay, on the 24th is when that combustion actually happens. All right, and then on the 26th, Mars is sextile the sun, so there may be some exposure closure of something here. You might get some news, you might get some information, and this again happens between your 11th and your 9th house, right? So again, there's emphasis here on like, oh, now at this point you get to the 26th. This is like, oh, wait a minute, you get communication from a new lawyer and they like, absolutely, we can, we can absolutely take this case on, or, we have high faith that we're going to be able to get you a settlement of, this amount, right? This is kind of like if you follow through with your behaviors, right? Because again, the emphasis of Mars in Virgo is systematic and analytical behavior, right? So if you push forward in this energy, you get good news, right? If you don't, you're going to be like, dang, I messed that up, right? Because again, the lessons, it's all about lessons. We're all here to learn lessons, okay? So now, after the 26th, Mars is going to make its way through Virgo, and there won't be any other aspects that happens, with Mars and Virgo. Okay, so once we get to July 23rd, which is almost a month after the last aspect, that is when Venus is square Mars, and that is going to be in your 8th house, right? So essentially what is happening is in your 11th house of community, you are pushing forward and creating consistent action within this realm of life. And then in comes, your 8th house of Gemini. So earth and air don't really mesh too well. Okay. And this is your house of transitions, right? Your 8th house represents debt. It represents karma. It represents other people's money. It represents your spouse's money, inheritances. It represents sexuality. It represents things we got to leave behind. It represents a lot. Okay. I'm just not even gonna lie. However, it's transformations and transitions. Let's just go with that. All right. So there's something here that pops up in reality for you as it relates to your actions, right? So as Mars is moving through Virgo, we are learning to be consistent with our action. Okay. Now we get to, July 23rd, and this is where we're asked to pivot. Right? You've been doing the same thing over and over and over again. You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. But then you get to, the later part of July, and it's like, okay, now you doing it like this ain't really working for you here. So how are you going to pivot? How are you going to adjust your behavior so that it can still very much so work? You got to stop and you got to analyze what's happening in this moment and calibrate your actions so that you can continue forward to your highest and greatest good, right? The idea isn't that we continue to do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. Yes, we have consistency in our behaviors. However, right, there are going to be times where we need to pivot, right? So this is a moment where you're going to have to pivot after doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, right? That's why the energy will be a little bit difficult in this moment, because this is kind of like, how when you start writing or you start doing something, you're playing a game, and then somebody comes in the middle of it and you feel like you got a good stride on whatever it is that you're doing. You watching a Netflix series, whatever it is that you're doing consistently, and somebody's like, hey, wait a minute, can you stop and like go do this? That it'd be that type of energy. For you, Scorpio, there's an emphasis here on consistent and persistent, diligent behavior in your community, right? This is your friends. Again, this is your social groups. This is employer, right? This is your hopes and your wishes, right? This is your earned wealth, right? This is consistent behavior in that realm of life. And as you continue to push through, right, you are moving on from one thing and into another, and you have to concentrate your behaviors on being consistent here. All right. And at the end of, Mars in Virgo, right, there's going to be a need for you to pivot in your consistent behavior, but still keep it consistent-ish. You just need to solution for something that still fits the mold and allows you to still be consistent, but maybe an adjustment. Okay, Scorpio, I hope this message reaches you well. Pisces, Mars and Virgo is going to be entering into your 7th house, and that is your house of long-term bonds. This is your relationships, your partnerships, your commitments, your business partner, your legal contracts, okay? Now, Mars in Virgo dictates to us that we need to be more consistent in our behavior. We need to be more considerate and analytical of how it is that we behave or we act in specific situations. So, for you, Pisces, this is going to be within your long-term bonds. So, as Virgo makes its way in so as Mars makes its way into Virgo, right, there is this separating square happening between Uranus in your third house and Mars in your seventh house. Now, Mars is coming from your sixth house of Leo. Okay, so Uranus is in the last degrees of Taurus in your third house, and Mars is it created a square to Uranus in your third house from your sixth house, right? So there is some sort of change in daily routines, habits. This could have been illness or sickness or something, change in pet, right? A change in independence, right? So there's an emphasis here of like your mental process changing with it, right? So with your mind, right, your third house of mind, your communication, your language, right? This is your practical behavior. This is your patient behavior within your thought process or your perspective or how it is that you think or how it is that you communicate. So with this energy, right, there would have been something that has already happened before, Mars gets into Virgo in your seventh house, right? So this would have been something between the earlier part of June and like the 15th or the 17th of June. There's something here that happened, right? So for you, now you are, your mind is, in a frenzy about what has just happened in your routines, right? Now with Virgo, now, with Mars entering into your seventh house, right, there's an emphasis here on you concentrating on your long-term bonds or your partnerships, right? And with this seventh house and Virgo energy, right, you are kind of feeling the release of the grips of this square energy because now both Uranus and Mars are going to be in Earth, and those are compatible signs. Virgo and Taurus are compatible, right? So there's an emphasis here on you feeling that ease of energy and using that energy to kind of push forward in, your thought process around your partnerships or your long-term bonds, right? You could have at this moment had some sort of routine with a friend, and then maybe, that long-term bond, that person became inconsistent, or, something there didn't work out and it frustrated you. And now you are concentrating on your thought process around your long-term bonds or your commitments, okay? Now, as Mars goes through Virgo, it becomes sextile to Jupiter and the Sun. All right, now I talk about this energy in my Jupiter and Cancer video, so go watch those if you haven't, because I go into much more detail about it. However, this energy, the Sun getting close to Jupiter and having that conjunction on the 24th of June, right, it's called a combustion. So the Jupiter in Cancer, the exaltations and the exaltation and the positive benefits of Jupiter in Cancer are going to be dampened as the Sun gets closer to Jupiter, because it kind of overshines Jupiter, okay? And this is in the realm of Cancer in your fifth house, right? So this is your house of dating, right? This is your house of entertainment, your self-expression, your love affairs. This is the house of drama. This is the house of, children, your first child, casual sex, casual dating, your entertainment, fun and games, okay? So there is an emphasis here on the 22nd, there being something here that pops into reality for you. Something here, a situation, something sextile means opportunities. But in this moment on the 22nd, before the combustion happens between the Sun and Jupiter on the 24th, you may not necessarily be feeling it like that. Okay, you may not see this as a positive thing, because in this moment you're going to feel emotional because the Sun in Cancer is overpowering Jupiter, right? You're going to feel emotional and on emotional edge, right? So then that combustion happens on the 24th, and then once that happens and the Sun moves past Jupiter, right, then the sun creates a sextile to Mars. All right, so the sun is about exposure. So now you get a double whammy within like what is that, 4 days, right? The 22nd, something pops up and you like, yeah, I'm feeling emotional. The 24th comes, you feel deeply emotional. The 26th comes and this thing pops back up again, but you're not as emotional because the sun now has passed Jupiter. And you're like, wait a minute, hold on, what's this? Right? And that's in your fifth house of creativity. So again, there's an emphasis here on you concentrating on diligent behaviors, systematic behaviors, and your analysis of your own behaviors within your long-term bonds or within your commitments. Okay. And then on the 22nd, the 26th, you're going to see opportunities arise in reality about, creating something new for yourself. And this could be something fun. This could be, a casual, dating affair, a casual, friends with benefits or something like that. You're creating, a new business because the fifth house also represents entrepreneurships. And the seventh house also represents, your commitments and your business partnerships. So you might ultimately find a new business partner or something new, right? But the concentration ultimately needs to be in your seventh house, right? Your diligence on your actions in pushing forward. Okay. Now, once we get past June 26th, right, Mars is going to continue making its way through Virgo, and it's not going to aspect any other planets, right? So again, this is just concentration on consistency of your behavior, right? Because that's the concentration with Mars and Virgo, consistency within your behavior. Okay, then we're going to get to the 23rd of July. All right. And on the 23rd of July, Mars is going to create a square to Venus, right? So Venus is going to be sitting in your fourth house of home and internal security. All right. So as you are pushing through this energy while Mars is in Virgo, we get to the last parts of Virgo, and Venus sitting in Gemini, right? Virgo and Gemini energy don't really mesh like that. All right. It's earth and air. They don't mesh. Right. However, after Mars goes through Virgo, it's going to hit Libra. Right. So this is like a test. This is kind of like this square energy is like, I don't even want to say a test. This square energy is a requirement of you to adjust your behavior again, right? You've practiced, you've had a whole month of practice of, being consistent specifically here in this realm of life. And now something's going to pop up over here, and that's going to be at home. That is going to be in your sense of security. That is, where your nurturing parents reside. That is your origins. That's your past, right? That is your generational gifts. And this is kind of like, now you are going to have to concentrate your efforts in being consistent and analytical, but also flexible, right? Being flexible in your behavior, not necessarily changing it drastically, right? But like, okay, I see I've been doing this over and over and over again. Something pops up here that doesn't necessarily this behavior does not necessarily mesh well with that. So how can I adjust myself and my behaviors so that it does actually mesh well over there as well? Right? That doesn't necessarily mean you completely change your agenda. That just means it's a pivot moment, right? So that is what's going to be happening on the 23rd of July. It's going to be a square, and it's going to require you to kind of be imaginative or think outside of the box in the realm of home. Okay. So Pisces, for you, what you are going to have to concentrate on in this moment is your behaviors around your partnerships and your commitments and your long-term agreements, okay? Also your relaxation, okay? You might need to concentrate on relaxing as well, right? And being consistent with that, or, maybe less consistent with relaxing and more consistent with, your actions around your business. It really depends on the person and how your whole chart is shaped up. However, for Pisces, again, there is going to be an emphasis on your commitment to your behaviors and your long-term bonds, your agreements, your contracts, your commitments. Okay, so as long as, you know, between June 17th and August 8th, as long as you are concentrating on forward movement and being consistent with your behavior within this realm, you should be good to go. And then when we get to July 23rd and, you know, something seems weird, or, you know, your behaviors are not begetting the results that they once were, pivot yourself a little bit, right? And continue forward. Okay, Pisces? I hope this reaches you well.